Hi everyone, welcome back or welcome to Apple Makes. This is Yarn Time episode 10. Very exciting. So I just want to get right into it today. It is finally spring, although for me right now, it doesn't really feel that way. It is so cold outside, but definitely the glimmer of spring is there. And so I do have a couple of spring knits on my needles right now, and then I'll also talk about some patterns that I've been eyeing that I've either already purchased or am planning on purchasing and will hopefully be able to cast on in the next few months as the weather hopefully gets warmer. So yeah, so today will be about like blouses and tops and stuff like that. So hopefully you're excited for some spring knitting, and let's get right into it. All right, the first whip that I have is just some progress updates on my Zachary cardigan, which I showed last episode. I don't have any FOs to show today, but this one's pretty close. So I'll try to get it into the frame. But I have basically everything except for one sleeve. You can see I finished this sleeve, I think like a few days ago. And I have already the collar done as well. So I'll talk about that modification in a bit. But yeah, just one more sleeve. And the sleeve is, you know, because it's a raglan, already most of the way there. So I am hoping to get this finished up in the next week or so. And then that way, while it's still kind of in this transitional weather, I can wear it as a layer, you know, as like a bit of like a light jacket, etc. So I'm really excited. So let me just talk about very slight modification that I made, essentially just with the collar. So I made it pretty much as tall as the pattern suggests. I did sort of like riff a little bit about where to put the buttonhole, but I didn't, not that I didn't like the double stranded bind off that they have in the pattern, but I just thought it would be nice to go with the same rolled edge as all the rest of the edges that are like, you know, the hem, the bottom hem, and then the sleeve cuff, the sleeve cuff. So I just went with like a smaller rolled edge. So this one only has 3 rows of stockinette, and that way it kind of matches. And so I think it's nice. Again, it's like more trying to get a similar vibe. I do think that the bind off in the pattern, so I'll show a picture here, I think that is nice too. And it may be like a little bit neater looking, I guess you could say. But I don't know, I think I've been really into rolled edges lately, so I just went with that. But yeah, other than that, no modifications. I used I think it's Roxanne, no, it's not Roxanne Register. It's Suzanne Bryan's underarm method to avoid holes in the other arm. So you can see it's not bad. There is like very slight gapping. So I think I still need to work on my technique a little bit, but I do think her method is pretty reliable and it does end up looking pretty symmetrical. So I do think it's a decent one to try if you're looking for a tutorial on avoiding underarm holes when picking up for like a raglan or something like that. So I'll link that below in case you are curious. So yeah, so that's my progress update on my Zachary. So let's get into some new whips that are a little bit more spring themed. So the first one that I have, I cast on while on the train to go visit my parents last week, and I've made pretty good progress, but it is the Everyday Loop blouse by Elder Loops. I really like her patterns. I've made like the waffle loop sweater, and I've also have another whip that is hibernating right now, which is the direction loop. But I had my eye on this for a while, and I think I have mentioned it in a previous episode, but I'll just show a picture here. I really like the drape of this particular blouse. I think it is like a perfect balance between being like a really simple, classic, basic, but also having like some nice touches. So the ribbing on the raglan stitches and the way that they then curve around the body, I think it's a nice touch that also just makes it more interesting to knit as opposed to just like a plain all over stockinette pattern. And so I have made it, I think I'm maybe like 2/3 of the way through, I think this is the front, through the yoke. And then, you know, I will be able to split pretty soon, I think, and then start working on the body. But this has been quite an enjoyable little raglan. Like I mentioned with the Zachary, that one has a little bit more tedious because it is also larger and knit flat. So being able to knit in the round right away and on a smaller scale has been a lot more satisfying. And yeah, the pattern is, you know, very easy to follow. There's some short row shaping for the back neck. And then other than that, it's like pretty basic with some interesting increases to get the ribbing pattern to curve forward on the body, which I think is cool. So I'm knitting this with 2 strands. It is 1 strand of holst garn Coast, which is their merino cotton blend, which is really nice. That's in the color warm brown. And then I'm holding it with a hand-dyed yarn from Big Little Yarn Co. And I think that's a blend of alpaca and British wool of some kind. But that's also a fingering weight wool. So together they make pretty much like a worsted weight because the Coast blooms so much. So I think it's like a really nice weight for this blouse where it is sort of more on like the worsted, light worsted side, but because there is that cotton blend, I think it'll still be light enough to wear during the spring. And so it'll be a really nice sort of transition piece, I think, for the upcoming months. So I'm really excited for this, and I really like the color. It is just this really nice sort of mottled brownie because I love brown, and then just like with little flecks of like orange and maybe a little bit of red and some lighter bits. So overall, super beautiful, and I do like how the warm brown kind of ties it all together. And so you get that variegated effect, but it is all sort of like toned down and harmonious, which I think is really nice. All right, my next whip is actually the Cloud Blouse by Petite Knit. So if you watched my previous episode, you'll know I mentioned wanting to make the cloud sweater, which is the Aran weight version of this pattern. But then I realized, why not just knit the lighter version and have it be kind of a spring piece, and that way I also don't have to buy any additional yarn because I already have the yarn weight that I would need for this pattern. So I am knitting this with 1 strand of, also from Holst Garn, Supersoft, and this is in the color Willow. So here's my skein of that. And then I'm holding it with the Holst Garn Lucia, which is their alternative to mohair. And so for me, I have mentioned this before, but I am pretty sensitive to mohair, especially I feel like cheaper mohair is especially scratchy for me. And so at that same price point, I find like an alpaca silk lace to be a much nicer alternative. And so the Holst Garn Lucia is, I think, a blend of alpaca, silk obviously, and then there's some yak and merino wool in there as well. So it overall is just super soft. I don't find it to be scratchy, and it still has that really pretty fluffy look. So you can take a look at the fabric here. It's just nice and drapey, and it still has that little bit of halo. And so this is a super pretty color combination. Holst Garn does this nice thing where they suggest which yarns from their different lines can go together well. And so the Lucia is in the color Cactus, which is supposed to be like a perfect pair for the Willow. And it just makes a super pretty, like grayish green, also sort of heathered look that I think will be really nice and really pretty color to wear for the spring as well. I'm knitting a size small here. I was kind of debating whether to size up even more because I think technically based on the amount of positive ease in the pattern, I should be knitting like maybe an extra small. But I thought it's nice to have a little bit of ease and still have it not be too oversized to achieve more of that, again, like a blouse effect as opposed to a sweater or a pullover. And so I think we'll see how it goes. I feel like it should be kind of similar sizing as the loop blouse, and so it'll just be kind of more of a lighter layer to wear. But yeah, I'm really excited so far about how this is turning out. Again, I really like this drape that the fabric has. It's very lightweight. And then, you know, this is also going to bloom quite a bit when it washes as well. And I think it should knit up pretty quickly. It is a fairly basic pattern. There is, you know, there's short row shaping on the back and the front, but none for the sleeves. And so I think it'll work up pretty quickly. And despite being a blouse with such thin strands, the gauge is still more of a worsted weight. So it's 20 stitches per 10 centimeters. And so, yeah, I think it'll just be working up pretty quickly. I cast this on like, I think like 2 days ago, and I haven't really been working like so hard on it. So I'm hoping to have this done soon as well. And then this will be also a really nice transition piece along with the loop blouse. And yeah, no modifications planned for this one. I think I'm probably gonna knit it as is. I do really like also the rolled edges on this one, a little bit of a theme for me. But I like the combination with, I think it is 1x1 ribbing. I think that looks kind of cool and has this additional texture that I think is really nice. And it does also, in my opinion, make it a little bit more of a beginner friendly pattern because you don't need to do like any sort of sewn bind off. You can just do a regular bind off after doing the rolled edge. So I can see why this pattern is so popular along with the cloud sweater. And you know, petite knit definitely is very successful for, I think, good reasons. So it's been fun to knit one of her patterns because it has been a while for me to knit one of her patterns. So yeah, definitely recommend this. And I think it's a pattern that you can knit with a lot of different yarns. Like I think it'd be really cool to try doing this with like maybe 2 strands of like a silk lace or like 1 strand of more of like a linen blend. But we'll get into some other spring blouse options in just a moment. All right, so now for some plans and patterns that I'm excited for this spring. And I will also talk about some potential yarns that I think would be nice for the patterns. And then maybe I'll just show a picture of like what colors I might be considering. So hopefully this is some inspiration for you if you're thinking about what to knit this spring. Again, because it's like, you know, could be cold, could be warm. At least where I live, it is sort of like totally random, it seems sometimes, what the spring weather is going to be like. So it is nice to have layers that, you know, can kind of work for a wide variety of temperatures. So let's get into it. And, you know, I'll show some pictures because I don't have any of these on the needles yet. But the first one I want to talk about is one that I fell in love with right away when I saw it, but it is the Jelly Top, and I believe it is by May Bruns. And I just think this is such a pretty and unique knit top. It has ruching all over, which I believe is achieved by changing the gauge between the little puffy parts and then the kind of more cinched parts. But this is just like a really pretty, cool looking top that I think would be a lot of fun to knit as well. And so most of the samples that I've seen have been done in some sort of like mohair or mohair alternative, but you could also knit this in maybe like a lace weight wool or cashmere, or even maybe like an alpaca, I think has been suggested. But for me personally, some of the yarns that I'm considering while thinking about how to plan out my version would be maybe holst Lucia, which is I'm using right now for my cloud blouse. Another mohair alternative that I have seen for a while that I've never actually purchased is the fyberspates cumulus. This is also, I believe, alpaca based. It is a little bit heavier or thicker, like something more of like a heavy lace. So I think actually that could work well for a top like this that is composed entirely of this type of fluffy lace and just give it a little bit more structure and sturdiness. And then another alternative for this would be Isager's, I don't know how to say that. Isager's Eco Soft Fine, which I also have seen in some patterns, usually held double with something else, but on its own, I think it would be really pretty. And again, for me, as someone who doesn't really like mohair that much, this is also an alpaca-based alternative. So those are some options that I'm considering for my jelly top. And I also probably would knit like a long sleeve version. So here it has a long sleeve, a short sleeve, and a sleeveless, which is really nice that the pattern comes with these different options. But I think the long sleeve to me looks maybe like the most elegant, which is what draws me to it. But I think the sleeveless is also nice and cute, and that seems like it would work up fairly fast. So that's the first pattern that I'm really excited for potentially casting on. All right, next up I have two different blouses that I think would work really well for a particular yarn combo that I'm really excited to maybe try out sometime soon. So I'll talk about those two patterns first, and then I'll describe the kind of yarn that I'm thinking of for them. But the first one is the Charlie pullover by Marika Knits. I haven't done anything by this designer. I think their stuff is pretty popular based on the number of projects on Ravelry. But for the Charlie pullover, I've had this saved for a while actually as an alternative to the Elizabeth blouse by Petite Knit, which is very similar. It is like sort of like that polo neck, long sleeve, and they're both done, I believe, in cashmere as being one of the main suggestions. But I read some reviews of both the patterns, and some people were saying they like the structure of the Charlie pullover a little bit more. And I think to me in that design, it would be important for the collar to not be too floppy, to give it more of that classic polo look. I don't actually know if it's true. It could just be, you know, different people's experience. But again, I think it'd be cool to try a different designer. So that's why I think I'm set on the Charlie pullover. I think she also recently released the cardigan version of this design, which would also be a potential option. But for me, I think the cardigan to me doesn't add as much to the design to be worth knitting so much flat, basically. So I think I'll probably stick with the pullover, and I would really like to do it in cashmere. So I'll talk about what kind of vibes I'm thinking of in a second. But the other design that I think would also really suit this yarn combo that I'm thinking of is a new design by My Favorite Things Knitwear that was released recently, which is her blouse number 4. So you can see the silhouette of that is actually kind of similar to some of the other blouses, like the everyday loop blouse and then some of the blouses that Petite Knit has. I think it appeals to me because the shoulder construction of the sleeves looks very thoughtful. So I think I would like to give that one a go if I were to knit another blouse in that style. And for this one as well, it is knit in cashmere. I think it's part of her new cashmere series. And I personally have been hesitant on trying cashmere up until now because of the price, obviously. But I recently cottoned on to the fact that you can buy pretty discounted cashmere cones off of Color Mart. So for those of you who know Color Mart, I have heard of it for a while, but never really figured out what to buy from there. And for those of you who have bought from Color Mart, I would love to hear about your experience. You know, how do you get the most out of it, and any particular fibers that you like to get from there. But I believe cashmere is one of the best deals that you can get from Color Mart. And so what I would really love to do is buy a couple cones of cashmere lace and kind of create like a custom blend of colors. And part of my inspiration for this is a yarn seller, I think, that I've been following on Instagram for a while that's based in Korea called All Studios. And they do these sort of like custom lace blends that basically work up, I think, to worsted weight. And I've always thought that looked really cool. Like you can combine a bunch of different colors that don't necessarily have to be, you know, harmonious or complementary, and it creates a really cool marled effect. And I think that would be kind of the vibe that I would want to try to go for with this particular yarn combo. And so that would look, I think, really cool in either of these two patterns that I've just mentioned. But this is a little bit more, in my head, an ambitious project. So if you were to knit either one, the Charlie pullover or the blouse number 4, you could definitely just go kind of the easier route and get like a Cardiff Classic, which is really popular cashmere option that I see on Ravelry, or any other kind of straight up cashmere from a skein that you can get from other yarn manufacturers. But that's kind of like my idea of like trying to make it a little bit more creative. So we'll see if we make it happen. And obviously it being done in cashmere, I think would be just really nice and special, and kind of the next step, I think, in my fiber journey. All right, one more spring top that is ambitious in a different way, which is ambitious in that I hope it would be warm enough to wear this spring, but obviously can always just save it for the summer, is the Ivy top, also by Petite Knit. I have wanted to make sort of like a chill, laid back tank, but I haven't really figured out necessarily what fiber I want to use for it, because I have only really worked in terms of summer fibers with cotton, and cotton definitely has its pros and cons when it comes to knitting. So I have been doing a little bit of research on maybe some linen blends and things like that that would maybe work a little bit better. So some of the fibers that I am considering for the Ivy top would be another one from Holst Garn. You might be sensing a bit of a favorite, but they do have a wool and silk blend called Tynns, which I think could be really pretty for something like the Ivy top. Another classic, which I believe is one of the recommended yarns for this pattern, is the Sandnes garn Tynn line, which I think is a linen blend, or just anything kind of similar to that. I think I would definitely be interested in trying something from Sandnes garn. I haven't, as of yet, purchased any of their yarn, but it is obviously one of Petite Knit's really favorite brands, and I do see it used by a lot of other designers as well. And then another fun potential combo would be maybe the Noro Sonata, which is one of their fingering weight yarns. But Noro, a lot of their yarns are a combo of like silk, viscose, and sort of more summer, warm weather friendly yarns that I think also could be really nice for a tank piece like this. So yeah, I think that would be something that I might cast on a bit later when it finally starts to get warm, so that I have something less bulky on the needles for the warmer months. But I am excited to hopefully finally try knitting a tank, because I have pretty much only made like cardigans and pullovers and now some blouses, but nothing really truly warm weather appropriate. So I think it would be cool to try something like that with a lighter, warmer weather friendly fiber. All right, so those are the patterns that I've been eyeing. There are a bunch more saved in my Ravelry favorites. I'll just kind of shout out some random ones without getting into too much detail, but like the Sevilla blouse by Petite Knit looks really cool. And there is also some other tees and tanks that I have saved that, I might return to at some point. But, I don't want to overwhelm my queue too much. And hopefully just provide a little bit of inspiration for anyone who's looking for it in the meantime. But yeah, taking it slow as always, and I'm excited to hopefully have some warmer weather coming my way to maybe provide some additional inspiration. But for now, it's definitely blouse season, and I am really excited to get into some more transitional pieces. So yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful day. I hope wherever you are that spring is coming your way, and that you are gearing up to do some fun new knits or crochets or whatever it is that you're doing. And I will talk to you next time. Bye.